Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're embarking on a seriously fascinating journey. We are going to completely shatter some of history's greatest, most deeply ingrained myths. And we're doing it using hard, undeniable archaeological evidence. So buckle up, because prepare to have your perspective on the past entirely shifted.
Seriously, I want you to just think about this for a second. What if everything Hollywood taught you about history is a complete lie? I mean, we've all seen the epic movies, right? The intense dramas, the popular stories, but sometimes the actual truth gets totally lost in all that spectacle. Well, today we are setting the record straight.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for the explainer. First, the ancient labor illusion. Then, whitewashing the ancient world. Number 3, fictions of the arena. 4, debunking the Dark Ages. And finally, rethinking the Viking raiders. Let's get right into it.
Starting off with Section 1, the ancient labor illusion. Who really built the pyramids?
So for generations, the prevailing myth, heavily amplified by those classic Hollywood epics, is that the Great Pyramids were built by this massive, oppressed workforce of like 100,000 slaves. But the reality, absolutely fascinating. The builders were actually highly skilled workers working alongside local farmers who pitched in during the Nile's off-season. This whole massive misconception, it actually started way back with the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, and man, it just snowballed from there.
Because when archaeologists actually excavated at Giza, they found undeniable evidence of well-respected professionals. I mean, these workers were paid for their labor with tax exemptions. They were eating prime cuts of meat, and they lived in these sprawling, specialized worker villages built right next to the monuments. So, far from forced labor, this was a highly organized, completely compensated workforce operating under elite architects. Pretty amazing, right?
Moving right along to Section 2, whitewashing the ancient world, color and complexity. Okay, for centuries, we've all kind of just believed that ancient Greek statues were this pristine, plain white marble. But modern near-infrared scans have completely flipped the script. They were actually vibrantly painted. Artists used synthetic pigments like Egyptian blue for intricately patterned garments, and they used encaustic wax, which is this beeswax-based paint, to create highly realistic, really warm skin tones. Basically, centuries of weathering, combined with some Renaissance-era aesthetic assumptions, just entirely stripped antiquity of its true, brilliant colors.
And speaking of lost complexity, let's talk about Cleopatra. The popular myth always portrays her merely as this tragic, beautiful seductress, but in reality, she was a highly educated, unbelievably politically savvy pharaoh who expertly ruled Egypt for 21 years. That whole scandalous reputation of hers was largely just a deliberate smear campaign. It was constructed by Roman historians specifically to justify their political conquest of her empire. Talk about ancient propaganda.
All right, on to Section 3, fictions of the arena, gladiators and crowds.
So we all know the famous Colosseum gesture, right? The myth is that a thumbs down from the roaring crowd meant certain death for a defeated gladiator. But the historical reality is actually quite the opposite. To the Romans, an extended thumb, meaning sticking out of the fist in literally any direction, represented a sword thrust. That meant death. A concealed thumb pressed safely inside the fist actually meant mercy. All of this modern confusion comes from an 1872 painting called Paulus Verso by Jean-Léon Gérôme. That one painting completely inverted our modern understanding of the gesture and just cemented the thumbs down as a death sentence in pop culture forever. Crazy, right?
And while we're on the subject of Roman entertainment, here's a quick question for you to consider. What exactly was a vomitorium? I mean, it sounds absolutely disgusting, doesn't it?
Well, the crucial point here is that a vomitorium has absolutely nothing to do with throwing up food. The widespread myth claims that wealthy Romans had these designated rooms to purge their meals so they could just keep on eating at lavish banquets. Totally false. A vomitorium is simply an architectural term. It refers to a wide stadium passageway designed for massive crowds to quickly exit. It literally translates to spewing forth people out of the amphitheater. People, not their lunch.
Okay, moving into Section 4, debunking the Dark Ages, manufactured myths.
You've probably heard the idea that medieval people believed the Earth was flat, right? Well, it's a complete fabrication. The ancient Greeks actually documented a spherical Earth by the 5th century BCE, and medieval scholars universally accepted it as pure fact. It wasn't until the 19th century that writers totally fabricated the flat Earth myth, mostly just to create this false conflict between religion and science. Even Christopher Columbus didn't fear falling off the edge of the world. He just vastly underestimated the circumference of a globe that everyone already knew was round.
To really hammer this home, listen to what the eminent historian Stephen Jay Gould said about it.
There never was a period of flat Earth darkness among scholars. All major medieval scholars accepted the Earth's roundness as an established fact. Seriously, the whole science versus religion flat Earth narrative, it is a complete 19th century invention. And let's move along and see how this builds into another completely manufactured myth, the infamous Iron Maiden. For years, we've been told these were terrifying, spiked medieval torture devices. The reality? No way. They are actually 18th century commercial fakes.
So here's what happened. Back in the 1700s, a guy named Johann Philipp Siebenkees entirely fabricated a fictional story about an Iron Maiden being used in Nuremberg. Well, sensing a major business opportunity, museums later just patched together random metal artifacts to create these spooky, intimidating cabinets, literally just to profit from gullible tourists. They never actually existed in the Middle Ages.
Finally, our last territory today, Section 5, Rethinking the Viking Raiders, Beyond the Bloodshed. The contrast between the Hollywood Viking and historical reality is just staggering. Pop culture almost always shows us these brutal, mindless raiders wearing historically inaccurate horned helmets, constantly leaving villages in absolute ruins. But historically speaking, only a very small fraction of young men actually went on those violent raids. The vast majority of Norsemen were incredibly innovative craftsmen and sophisticated global traders. They were busy engaging in peaceful commerce and everyday family life.
And we actually know this for a fact from archaeological finds in places like Ribbig, which is Denmark's oldest town. Excavations there have uncovered evidence of highly specialized blue and white glass bead production, intricate wooden combs, and some really advanced craft tools. These peaceful, everyday artifacts paint a totally different picture. They show an organized society that was deeply invested in skilled labor and trade, definitely not just endless warfare.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought based on everything we've just uncovered together. How many of our own modern beliefs are going to be viewed as ridiculous myths in 1,000 years? History is so often completely shaped by those who tell it. And as you've seen today, the truth is usually far more complex and way more interesting than the myth. Thanks so much for joining me. Always keep questioning what you think you know, and I'll see you in the next explainer.